Scary stories to fall asleep to. This is the third descent into the silence that breathes when the lights go out, and a final warning: you won't sleep after this. Have you ever wondered why your mind insists on finding shapes in the deep grain of wooden doors during the dead of night? Why does the sudden drop in temperature in an empty hallway feel like a physical weight pressing against your chest? Is it possible that the architecture of our homes serves not only to keep the world out, but to trap something much older within its walls? If the shadows are merely the absence of light, why do they seem to possess a density that shifts when you look away? What if the safety of your bed is nothing more than a fragile, paper-thin illusion designed to keep you from noticing the rhythm of a breath that is not your own? You believe that by closing your eyes, you become invisible to the dark, but the reality is far more unsettling. Tonight, we are not just telling stories. We are stripping away the layers of your perceived security to reveal the structural coldness of the places you call home. By the time we reach the end of this journey, you will no longer see your surroundings as a sanctuary, but as a complex machinery of isolation that observes you in return. You are now crossing a threshold where the air grows thick and the familiar becomes a foreign landscape of dread. Imagine yourself standing at the end of a long, unlit corridor in an old house somewhere in the damp, rural heart of the United States. The floorboards beneath your feet are not just wood. They are the dry, brittle bones of a structure that has watched generations wither. Feel the texture of the air, heavy with the scent of old dust and the metallic tang of approaching rain. There is no wind here, yet the curtains sway with a deliberate slow motion that defies the stillness. Every sound is magnified, the rhythmic ticking of a clock that seems to slow down with every beat, the distant groan of settling timber, and the hum of electricity that vibrates through the walls like a nervous pulse. You are a guest in a space that has forgotten the meaning of hospitality. In this environment, every shadow is a calculated presence, and every silence is an interrogation. As you move forward, the darkness doesn't retreat. It invites you deeper, wrapping around your senses like a cold shroud. This is the beginning of a revelation that will change the way you perceive the night forever. There is a specific kind of fear that only exists in the American landscape, born from vast distances and the silence of forgotten towns where the porch lights flicker out one by one. Here, the concrete and the timber hold memories of things that were never meant to be remembered. You are here to witness the collapse of the boundary between the seen and the unseen. Before we descend further into the anatomy of this cold silence and uncover what lies beneath the floorboards of your consciousness, consider the path we are walking together. Make sure you're already subscribed to this channel, because the shadows narrated here are just the surface of a much larger abyss that we explore every week. And you don't want to be helpless when the next door opens without warning. The anatomy of cold silence is not merely the absence of noise, but a structural presence that occupies the corners of a room like rising water. As you move from the hallway into the heart of this skeletal house, notice how the temperature shifts, not in a sudden gust, but in stagnant pockets of frost that cling to the wallpaper. In the rural stretches of the American landscape, houses are often built with heavy timber and deep basements, designed to withstand the external elements while inadvertently creating internal chambers of perfect isolation. You find yourself walking across a kitchen where the linoleum is cracked and yellowed, feeling the grit of decades under your soles. The light from a single bare bulb overhead doesn't illuminate. It casts long, distorted geometries that stretch toward the pantry door. Why does the mind instinctively recoil from a door left slightly ajar? It is the functional design of the unseen, the gap that suggests a perspective looking back at you. Here, the silence has a texture, a grainy, oppressive weight that makes your own heartbeat sound like an intrusive mechanical failure. You reach out to touch the wall, feeling the vibration of a house that is constantly settling, shifting its weight as if trying to find a more comfortable position to wait for you. The wood is cold and slightly damp to the touch, smelling of pine sap and the slow rot of neglected attics. In this space, you are not the master of the environment. You are a biological anomaly in a kingdom of inanimate, watching things. The contrast between the stability of the walls and the fragility of your own skin becomes a crushing realization. These walls have stood for a century, housing the quiet desperations of those who lived here before, and they will likely stand long after your breath has stilled. Every creak of the floorboards is a language of physics, explaining how the pressure of your weight disturbs the equilibrium of the house. You are being tracked by the very architecture you rely on for shelter. We often believe that our homes are shields against the predatory nature of the wild, but we forget that a shield is also a cage. As you stand in the center of this kitchen, hearing the slow, rhythmic drip of a faucet that echoes like a counting down of seconds, you realize that the most terrifying thing isn't what might be hiding in the dark, but the realization that the dark has always belonged here. It is the indigenous inhabitant of the structure, and you are the fleeting trespasser. The stillness is so absolute that you begin to hear the sound of your own blood rushing through your ears, a frantic tide against the immovable stone of the silence. It is in this precise moment of vulnerability, when the house seems to lean in closer to listen to your thoughts, that the true nature of your isolation becomes clear. It is a slow, deliberate unveiling of the truth that we are never truly alone. For our memories and the imprints of the past remain etched into the very grain of the world. Reflecting on this heavy atmospheric pressure, it is impossible to ignore the feeling that some stories are not just heard, but inhabited. It is a weight that stays with you, much like a shadow that refuses to shorten even at noon. This feeling of being watched by the very air around you is a universal dread, a shared human experience that transcends the walls of this particular house. Let's make this a shared mark of our presence here. Now comment on the phrase, "The walls have ears and the shadows have eyes," because admitting this truth is the only way to validate what your senses are already screaming, transforming your fear into an unbreakable connection with everyone who is now also listening to this same silence. The weight of invisible eyes is a physical force that manifests as a prickling sensation at the base of your skull. A primal evolutionary alarm triggered by the realization that you have become the object of a focused gaze. As you leave the kitchen and begin to ascend the narrow wooden staircase, the air becomes thinner and the scent of old oxidizing iron begins to permeate the atmosphere. Each step you take is a deliberate intrusion into a vertical graveyard of memories. The stairs do not merely creak, they groan with a deep structural fatigue, a resonant frequency that vibrates through the soles of your feet and into your marrow. Notice the banister under your hand, the wood polished smooth by the palms of the dead, cold and unforgivingly hard. The staircase is a transitional space, a vulnerable bridge between the communal areas of the home and the private sanctuaries of the upper floor, and here you are suspended in a void. To your left, the wallpaper is peeling in long, jagged strips that resemble the skin of a shedding reptile, revealing the grey lath and plaster beneath, the hidden ribcage of the house. Why does the darkness at the top of the stairs feel more substantial than the darkness at the bottom? It is because you are moving away from the exits, climbing deeper into the lungs of the building, where the oxygen feels recycled and stale. The light from below is swallowed by the upward incline, leaving you to rely on the limited reach of your own senses. You hear a sound, a soft, wet friction, like a heavy cloth being dragged across a dusty attic floor directly above you. You freeze. The house freezes with you. In this state of absolute stillness, the contrast between the rigid stability of the architecture and the frantic, fluid pulsing of your own terror becomes an unbearable tension. You are a soft, warm thing in a world of hard, cold angles. The shadows in the corners of the landing are not flat. They have volume and depth, shifting with a slow, predatory intelligence that waits for the blink of your eyes. You realize that the house is not just a structure of wood and nails, but a filter that separates the living from the vast, indifferent silence of the universe. Every element of this building, the heavy doors, the reinforced joists, the thick insulation, was designed to provide security. Yet here, they serve only to amplify your entrapment. You are beginning to understand that the true terror is not the presence of a monster, but the absence of safety in the place where it was most promised. The darkness is a mirror, reflecting your own insignificance back at you through the hollow eyes of the empty rooms. As you reach the top landing, the floor beneath you feels unnaturally soft, as if the wood has begun to lose its density, becoming as porous as the fear that fills your mind. You are standing on the edge of a revelation, a point of no return where the material world begins to dissolve into the symbolic weight of the Ankh-Noun. If you can feel the gravity of this moment, the way the atmosphere pulls at your resolve, then you understand the value of this shared journey into the heart of the American night. Enjoy this video now to seal your presence in this exploration, because each sign of support is like a small flame that we keep burning against the vastness of this darkness that insists on advancing. Structural decay and lost purpose reveal the true skeleton of fear, for there is nothing more unsettling than a machine that no longer functions or a room that has forgotten its inhabitant. You move down the upper hallway where the doors are lined up like silent sentinels, each one guarding a hollow space of stagnant air and forgotten history. The floor here is uneven, sloping slightly toward the center of the house, as if the foundations are slowly surrendering to the relentless pull of the gravity beneath the soil. In the United States, the suburban and rural sprawl is littered with these husks of ambition, where the drywall eventually crumbles into white dust and the copper pipes turn green with oxidation. You approach the master bedroom, the door standing half open, inviting you into a space where the contrast between former abundance and current scarcity is most profound. The air in this room is colder than the hallway, smelling of wet wool and the bitter scent of old medicine. You can see the faint outline of a bed, its mattress stripped and stained, looking like a discarded organ in the middle of the floor. The windows are clouded with a layer of grime that filters the moonlight into a sickly grey luminescence, casting shadows that look like long, thin fingers grasping at the baseboards. Why does the sight of a vacant chair in a corner evoke such a deep sense of dread? It is because our minds instinctively fill the void with the presence of what should be there, creating a phantom resonance that lingers in the physical world. You notice the peeling paint on the ceiling, hanging in delicate flakes that drift downward like slow-motion snow every time a heavy truck passes on the distant highway. This is the structural functionalism of decay. The house is breathing its last, exhaling the memories of those who once felt safe within these four walls. You realize that the stability you take for granted in your own life is merely a temporary agreement with the materials of the world. Just as these walls are failing, so too does the barrier between your conscious mind and the primal fears that dwell in the subconscious. Every crack in the plaster is a gateway, a failure of the boundary that keeps the chaos of the outside world from leaking into your sanctuary. The fragility of this environment is a mirror to your own vulnerability. You are standing in a monument to the temporary, a place where the American dream has slowed down, curled, and eventually turned into a lingering nightmare of wood and stone. As you turn to leave the room, you feel a sudden, sharp draft against your ankles, as if something has just rushed past you to hide in the closet. The house is no longer just a setting. It is an active participant in your psychological unraveling. This journey through the layers of structural abandonment serves as a reminder that we are all just guests in the spaces we occupy. If the weight of this atmospheric decay has reached you, then you are ready to share this burden with others who walk the same dark paths. Share this video with someone who also finds beauty and dread in silence, for true darkness can only be understood when shared among those who are not afraid to look at what the rest of the world ignores. The geography of isolation extends far beyond the physical walls of the house, bleeding into the vast, indifferent landscape that surrounds this decaying monument. As you retreat from the bedroom and look through the grime-streaked glass of the hallway window, you see the American wilderness not as a scenic backdrop, but as an encroaching sea of shadows. In the rural heartlands, distance is a weapon. It separates the scream from the ear and the victim from the road. The trees outside, stripped of their leaves by the biting autumn air, stand like skeletal fingers, clawing at a sky that has forgotten the color of blue. The wind howls across the plains, hitting the side of the house with a dull thud that makes the entire structure shudder in its boots. This is the structural reality of the void, where the lack of human presence creates a vacuum that something else must fill. You observe the way the moonlight dies on the edge of the woods, refusing to penetrate the dense thicket of oaks and pines. There is a rhythm to this exterior darkness, a slow, tidal pulse of predators and prey, of things that move with a calculated silence that puts our clumsy human footsteps to shame. You feel the temperature in the hallway drop even further, the insulation in the walls having long ago surrendered to the persistent rot of the seasons. Why does the vastness of the outdoors feel just as claustrophobic as the narrowest corridor? It is the realization that there is nowhere to run, where the silence does not already wait for you. The contrast here is between the domestic intent of the porch light, now shattered and dark, and the primordial hunger of the earth. You are witnessing the slow complaint of the manufactured by the natural, a process that is as beautiful as it is terrifying. The house is being digested by the landscape, and you are currently inside the belly of the beast. The sounds from outside, the snapping of a dry branch, the distant, distorted cry of a coyote, are filtered through the wood and plaster, reaching your ears like ghostly echoes of a world you no longer belong to. You are caught in a geographical trap, a point on a map that has been quietly erased by time and neglect. As you stand there, staring into the blackness of the yard, you realize that the house isn't protecting you from the woods, it is presenting you to them. The windows are not eyes for you to see out of, but openings for the night to see in. The density of the atmosphere is now so thick that it feels as though you are moving through water, every gesture slowed by the sheer pressure of the isolation. You are learning that safety is a matter of perception, and your perception is currently being dismantled by the cold, hard facts of the American night. This realization of your own insignificance, nace in the face of the vast, uncaring geography of the world, is the first step toward a deeper, more philosophical understanding of the fear that has followed you up these stairs. The rhythms of an unseen life begin to emerge when you stop resisting the silence and start listening to the mechanical heartbeat of the house. Every structure has a pulse, a series of repetitive movements and sounds that define its internal life, and in this abandoned American manner, those rhythms have turned predatory. You find yourself standing at the threshold of the basement door, a heavy slab of oak that feels unnaturally warm compared to the freezing air of the hallway. Why does the basement represent the ultimate failure of our domestic courage? It is the functional gut of the home, the place where the furnace breathes, where the pipes sweat, and where the foundations meet the raw, unthinking earth. As you descend the concrete steps, the sound of your breathing becomes the loudest thing in existence, a ragged, uneven counterpoint to the steady, rhythmic thrumming that vibrates through the floor. The air down here is thick with the scent of damp lime and old, stagnant grease. You can hear the slow, deliberate expansion of the heating ducts, a series of metallic clicks that sound like teeth meeting in the dark. This is the structural reality of the unseen. The house is performing its duties in a vacuum, maintaining a temperature for inhabitants who are no longer there, circulating air for lungs that have long since ceased to move. You see the shadows of the water heater casting a bloated, distorted shape against the weeping stone walls, a silhouette that seems to breathe in sync with your own terror. The contrast between the organized intent of the plumbing and the chaotic encroachment of the mold is a testament to the fragility of human order. We build these systems to provide comfort, yet when left alone, they become the instruments of an alien environment. You feel the grit of the concrete floor beneath your shoes, a fine powder created by the slow spraying of the foundation under the weight of the house above. You are in the engine room of a ghost ship, surrounded by the ghosts of functionality. The rhythm of the house is not random. It is a cycle of decay and persistence, a slow-motion collapse that invites you to witness its final stages. Every drop of water hitting the floor is a mark of time, a measurement of the house's slow dissolution into the soil. You are standing in the very center of the house's subconscious, where the pretensions of the upper floors are stripped away to reveal the cold, hard reality of survival and rot. The darkness here is total, a physical substance that fills your mouth and lungs, making you part of the very structure you fear. As you reach for the cold metal of a redundant valve, you realize that the house is not empty because it is dead, but because it has evolved beyond the need for human life. It is living its own, slow, geological life, and you are merely a momentary flicker of warmth in its cold, enduring heart. The fragile barrier of the senses is the last line of defense between your mind and the absolute reality of the dark. And here, in the depths of the lower level, that barrier is beginning to fray like old rope. You move through the shadows of the utility room, where the light from your own internal panic begins to project phantoms onto the damp walls. Have you noticed how, in total darkness, your eyes begin to manufacture the own light, creating swarming, colorful patterns that mimic the shapes of the things you fear most? This is the brain's desperate attempt to maintain the illusion of control, to fill the void with something, anything, rather than face the vacuum. The texture of the air has changed again. It is now oily and dense, clinging to your skin like a film of cold sweat. You hear a sound that doesn't belong to the house, a low, rhythmic scraping, like a fingernail tracing the line of a brick. It is a sound of intentionality, a movement that suggests a consciousness observing your every stumble. The structural stability of your reality is collapsing. You realize that the walls are not solid barriers, but porous membranes that allow the fears of the past to seep into the present. The contrast between the safety you once felt in the light and the absolute vulnerability you feel now is a chasm that cannot be bridged. You are a prisoner of your own biology, trapped in a body that was never designed to navigate the true night. Every sense is lying to you now, amplifying the rustle of a mouse into the footfall of a giant, turning the smell of old earth into the scent of a fresh grave. You are experiencing the deconstruction of the self, as the environment strips away your titles, your memories, and your confidence, leaving only the raw, shivering core of a creature trying to survive the dark. The house is teaching you a lesson in humility, showing you that without the thin veil of electricity and society, you are nothing more than a nervous system in a box of wood and stone. The darkness is not your enemy. It is the natural state of the universe, and you are the anomaly that insists on seeing. As you turn back toward the stairs, the darkness behind you seems to solidify, a wall of ink that moves as you move, always exactly one step behind your heels. You're no longer just an observer, you are a participant in a ritual of fear that has been performed in these American shadows for centuries. The weight of this realization is enough to make your knees buckle, yet you must keep moving. For to stop is to become part of the architecture itself, a permanent fixture in a house that never sleeps. The convergence of shadows occurs when the internal fear and the external reality finally align, creating a moment of terrifying clarity where the hidden truth of the house is revealed. You have ascended from the basement, but the house you have returned to is not the one you left. The angles of the rooms seem sharper, the ceilings lower, and the silence has been replaced by a low-frequency hum that makes your teeth ache. This is the climax of the revelation, the point where you realize that the house was never built for people, but as a vessel for the darkness itself. In the United States, we build houses with the hope of longevity, but we often forget that the land they sit upon has its own darker intentions. You stand in the center of the living room, where the moonlight finally breaks through the clouds, illuminating the space in a stark, forensic white. You see the dust motes dancing in the air, but they are not moving randomly. They are swirling in purposeful patterns, tracing the outlines of figures that are no longer there. The contrast between the abundance of the light and the emptiness of the space is a physical blow. You are standing in a graveyard of intentions, a place where every piece of furniture is a headstone for a failed dream. The structural integrity of the house is now secondary to its symbolic power. It is a lighthouse of dread, calling out to the dark parts of your own soul. You feel the presence of the house's history pressing in on you, 1,000 quiet sighs, 1,000 instances of breath held in the dark. The revelation is this: you are not being hunted by something outside yourself, but by the very space you chose to enter. The house is a mirror of your own inevitable decay, a reminder that everything we build, every wall we raise, is eventually destined to be reclaimed by the silence. The shadows are not hiding something, they are the thing itself. They are the truth that we spend our lives trying to outrun. As you look toward the front door, the only exit remaining, you realize that the distance between you and the threshold is not measured in feet, but in the courage to face the emptiness you have uncovered. The air vibrates with a final, resonant note, a sound that feels like a door closing deep within your own mind. You have seen the anatomy of the cold silence, you have felt the weight of the invisible eyes, and now you are part of the story that will be told to the next guest who gives to walk these halls. The final resonance is the vibration that lingers in your bones long after you have left the shadows, a haunting melody of the truths uncovered in the heart of the night. As you finally step toward the threshold, the house seems to exhale one last time, a long, rattling sigh of settling timber and coaling air that follows you like a cold hand on your shoulder. You cross the doorframe and step back onto the damp, uneven earth of the American yard, but the silence of the woods no longer feels like a threat. It feels like an extension of the silence you now carry within yourself. We believe that by leaving a place, we leave its influence behind. But the structural reality of fear is that it creates a permanent architecture in the mind. You are no longer the person who entered that house. You have seen the fragility of the walls that protect us, the decay of the systems we trust, and the predatory nature of the shadows we ignore. This journey has not been about the house, but about the layers of illusion we wrap around our lives to keep the cold at bay. The contrast between the warmth of the life you left behind and the stark, indifferent reality of the night is a permanent scar on your perception. You look back at the structure, its dark windows like hollow sockets, and you realize that it will continue to stand, continue to breathe, and continue to wait for the next soul to wander into its cold embrace. The house is a monument to the endurance of the unknown, a physical manifestation of the questions that have no answers. This is the symbolic elevation of our journey, the understanding that we are all in some way living in houses of our own making, surrounded by shadows we refuse to name. As you walk away into the grey light of the pre-dawn, the world feels thinner, more transparent, as if you could reach out and tear the sky like old wallpaper. You have survived the night, but the night has claimed a part of you in return. If you've watched this far, it's because you like this case. Leave a comment saying, "I've watched this far," so I can get to know you and know who really likes the stories here on the channel. This shared experience is the only fire we have against the encroaching darkness. Let the weight of this story settle in your mind. Let it change the way you look at the corners of your room and the space beneath your bed. Like this video to honor the courage to face what others fear, and share this narrative so that the circle of wakefulness never closes. Make sure you are already subscribed to this channel, because the silence is just beginning, and the next stories are waiting to be told right there at the edge of your vision. Good night if you can sleep.